Hello everyone, and welcome back to week 3 of the Spring Stitch Sampler Knit Along. I'm Holly from At Yarn's Length, and I'm going to be showing you how to knit the Greek Cross mosaic stitch. One really interesting thing that I like about this stitch is that it's perfectly symmetrical. So in the previous weeks when we worked the pyramid stitch here or the dotted wave stitch, here there was sort of a dominant color that you had to choose kind of between A and B, which one you wanted to be, these pyramids versus these pyramids. With the Greek cross stitch, it is perfectly symmetrical. So there is no dominant color. You're going to be working the motif in both colors, as you can see, with color B framed by color A, but also with color A framed by color B. And it repeats infinitely. So it really is a beautiful all over pattern, if you're looking for something for another project or maybe just to complete a blanket in this particular stitch, it would be really, really, really lovely. Okay, so let's get started. If you're completing our knit along, remember that you have to work those 2 setup rows for this section by knitting down and back in color A, and we're going to start the Greek cross stitch in color B. And if you are using this stitch pattern, if you stumbled upon us and you're using this for something else, you'll also want to have 2 setup rows in your whatever color you don't want to start with. And that just creates the base for your slipped stitches the next time down and back. I am using Red Heart Super Saver in white. My color B is Monet, which I'm getting over here, which is this lovely sort of pastel variegated yarn. And I've already worked the equivalent of my setup rows. I am just working a swatch. So I'm not going to be working multiple repeats. You'll just get to see how the stitch works out, for the first 11 rows or so. So these are my setup rows. Remember, if you're working the knit along, you're not binding off and casting back on. You're just going to keep going. And Greek cross stitch is worked over a multiple of 14 stitches that repeat plus 3 additional stitches. So I've cast on just 14 plus 3, so 17 stitches. Okay, it's worked over 20 rows, and this is another pattern that uses repeating rows. Of course, the top of the cross and the bottom of the cross are mirror images, and so we're just going to work through a few of those. As I said, we don't need to do all 20 for you guys to see all of them. Okay, so let's get started. Remember mine, because I'm just working 1 repeat and I'm not trying to fit it to the blanket. In the beginning and the end, my numbers are going to be a little different than yours, but the center stitches will always be the same. And there'll be more on that when we get to the chart. Ooh, you can hear already hear my circulars clinking along. Okay, so for row 1, we're going to knit 2. And remember, if this is the first time you're doing mosaic knitting, just going to tighten this up here, you are just going to start working with the next color. You don't have to worry about joining it or anything like that. You can weave this end in later. Same with your tail, no worries there. Just grab it and start knitting. So we're going to knit 2, slip 1 and knit 1. Make that guy a little bit tighter. Slip 1 and knit 3, and we're actually going to do this twice. Slip 1 and knit 3, and then we're going to slip 1, knit 1 twice. Slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, and with this last stitch, we always are going to knit the first and last stitch, so we know what to do with that one, even if the pattern didn't tell us. Remember that for mosaic knitting, on the even rows, you're going to come back down. You're going to slip your stitches that you slipped. You're going to knit your stitches that you knit. You don't even need to have a pattern for this part. The only thing that you're going to do, whoops, if you can get there, is to slip that stitch with your yarn in the front this time. And I do use my thumb to make sure that I don't have too much of a pull there, for my tension to get too tight. So you will see me occasionally pop my thumb in there. If you're wondering how to slip, you can slip always as if to purl and you'll be fine. You may notice I shift my, I flip my stitches, and some folks have asked about that, and I am a combination knitter, so I do wrap my pearls a little bit funny, which makes for interesting knitting in a lot of ways. And this is one way that it kind of comes up. You see me like reseat stitches all the time and not notice that I'm doing it. There you go. Decreases are also interesting, but that's another story for another day. Okay, so we've got rows 1 and 2 worked, and it doesn't look like much of anything now, so let's keep going. Okay, for rows 3, and row 3 is the same as row 19. We are going to just pick up our white yarn right here, and we always know we're going to knit that first stitch, right? We're going to knit 5, but 3 and 19 are the same, 5 and 17 are the same. You know, it's a completely symmetrical pattern, as I said, so lots of repeating rows. Knit 5, and now we're going to slip 1, knit 5. The pattern repeat for this one is slip 1, knit 5, slip 1, knit 7. But we don't have room for 7, and you will notice in the instructions that it does say end the last repeat with however many stitches. So that means that you're gonna looking at what's in between the stars, the asterisks. Slip 1, knit 5, slip 1, knit 7. That means you're gonna end the last repeat with slip 1, knit 5, slip 1, knit 8, or slip 1, knit 5, slip 1, knit 6, depending on the size. In my particular case, because I am working the swatch, I'm going to have a slip 1, knit 5. So you'll see that it says end the last repeat with however many stitches. That just means to work the things that are in between the stars or asterisks, whatever you'd like to call them. Work them as normal till you get to that very last repeat, and then just adjust the last knit however many. And this is one thing, I'll get a little closer so you can see. The yellow stitch sometimes is a little hard to see. That did trip me up, just because it's not super contrasting. So when I started working the blankets with this color, every now and again I would catch one that was so light. Whoops, sorry, I lost my light there. Every now and again I would catch one that was so light that I would miss it when I was doing my slips on the way back. And, you know, of course that's a mess. So the patterns do pop a little bit better when you're using contrasting colors, but also it's a little easier for you to keep track. Okay. So let me get that in frame for you. That's rows 3 and 4. And again, 3 is the same as 19. So we'll move on to 5. We're going to switch back to color B. As I said before, don't worry about what you were just working. Just pick up your new working color and start knitting. 5 is, we're going to start off with a knit 2. And then our actual pattern repeat is slip 1, knit 3, 3 times, slip 1, knit 1. So slip 1, knit 3, 3 times. And then a slip 1, knit 1. And of course we know we're going to knit that last stitch. And I've mentioned it in previous videos. If you haven't been around for the whole knit along, I'll explain just the first and last stitch of every row when you're working mosaic knitting does have to be actually worked. It can't be slipped. So you know it's always going to be in that dominant color that you're using rather than a slipped stitch. And so that's how I know if I get to the end of a row and I only have one stitch, of course it is going to be a knit stitch. And for those of you who slip your first stitch when you're working another project, you know, it creates this pretty this pretty neat edge down the side. That is something you're not able to do with mosaic knitting, because then you'd have these odd runs of one color jumping to the next row, or 2 rows up across the work. So that is how we always know. And I am using some long circulars, which is why you hear them clicking along my desk. They are my favorite to work with. They're kind of silly to use because I don't even know if I can get them in frame. Look how long these guys are. I think they're my 40 inchers. But yeah, they're kind of silly to use when I'm working such a tiny swatch. But I have just gotten in the habit of using circulars for just about everything. So. Okay, so there we go. That is row 5 and 6, and 5 is the same as 17. So we're going to be switching back to 7, or to color A for row 7. And I am starting to get a bit of a tangle here, so just want to mind which way I'm switching my yarns each time, so as not to tangle up the 2 that I'm working with. And as you can see, as you carry them up, you don't really notice. You know, once you work with them, you don't see any ugly edges or anything like that. So, no, we're going to work that first stitch as a knit, right? So for row 7, we're going to knit 3, just as our setup, and our repeat is slip 1, knit 3, slip 1, knit 1, and then slip 1, knit 3 twice. So slip 1, knit 3. Slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 3, and this should take us to the end of our work. Slip 1, knit 3. The interesting thing about this is, of course, when you're working the repeat over and over, what you're working is a slip 1, knit 1, and then 3 slip 1, knit 3s, because when you start the pattern over, you'll do a slip 1, knit 3 again. So just if you've kind of got in your head that you're doing 1 and then 3 3s, just be sure that you are mindful of where the pattern repeat ends, because it does end after 2 of the slip 1, knit 3 repeats. That is one thing I kind of talk to myself when I'm doing mosaic knitting and going down the odd row. You know, I might just say slip 1, knit 3, but I may also just say 1 3 3 3, 1 3 3 3. So I know that I'm working in terms of knits, 1 stitch and then 3 3s, 1 stitch and then 3 3s. It does help keep me on track. I might look a little crazy while I'm doing it. And then of course, if I'm saying 1 3 3 3 to myself, it doesn't end with a 3 3 3, so I have to refer back to that pattern. But you know, once you've knit across a whole blanket doing that, you don't mind referring to the pattern in the last minute. Okay, there it is. We're starting to see the bottom of the cross emerge right there. Okay, so now row 9, and we're back to color B. Have to be careful not to knit with my tail. Row 9, we're going to start with a knit 4. Okay, and this is the same as row 13. So knit 4, and then we're going to slip 1, knit 7, slip 1, knit 5. So slip 1 and knit 7. And you can kind of see as you're working this pattern whether you're doing it right or not, because you can see these 3 are centered on these 7, so you know that you're making the correct shape. So if you ever look at it and it just looks a little off, that's when you want to count back and just make sure you know you are where you are supposed to be. So the next part of the pattern is slip 1, knit 5, but we don't have 5. You know, we're going to end with a 4. And that does, in the case of the swatch, make a nice symmetrical pattern with 41714. So working back down the other way. I do like having these nice long runs in this pattern. Sometimes with mosaic knitting, there's a lot of slipping happening, and I feel like I'm losing my place between slip one, knit one 6 times or whatever it is. So I do like having these long runs to help me keep my place, but also I feel like I work a little bit faster. So this stitch is nice for that. All right, that's 9 and 10, which is the same as 13 and 14. Just kind of shape it out there a little bit for you, so you can see the shape starting to emerge there. And then we're going to work row 11. Rows 1 and row 11 are unique. They don't repeat, but every other pattern does repeat. So we'll do 11, and then 13 is just like 9. 15 is just like 7. Sorry, I'm counting forwards and backwards at the same time. 17 is just like 5, and so on. But row 1 and the row we're about to work, row 11, those are going to be the ones that are only ever worked once per repeat. So we're back to color A. Knit 1, so we're going to slip 1, knit 3, slip 1, knit 1 3 times, slip 1, knit 3. Okay, so slip 1, oops, slip 1, knit 3. There we go. 1, 2, 3. This is one I would have to follow. Can't remember to say all these things. Slip 1, knit 1 3 times. Okay, that's good. And then slip 1, knit 3. And I have 2 stitches left that are going to match these 2. Slip 1, knit 1. Okay, so that's what this looks like. Just a reminder, you always have to work that last row of the pattern. I know in the written patterns there is no row 20 listed or anything like that, and that's because all the even rows are worked the same. So just make sure you always get back to where you started. Almost there. All right. So once you're able to work those 12 rows, you can work the entire Greek cross stitch. Again, this is what it's going to look like. See if I can get this blanket up here for you. This is what it's going to look like as you work the full pattern with both crosses in white and crosses in your color B. So both of those will pop in your work. Okay, now let's take a look at what happens if you switch up the light and dark colors. The answer there, you can turn that either way so you guys can see it a little better, but the answer there is not much, right? So on this, it looks like there is a lot of difference. Since I've only worked one of each pattern, this is just like the swatch that I was working. It looks like you're going to get a very different pattern by swapping color A and B. But as I said, if you look at the finished product, you see that there really isn't a difference because it repeats so many times. So with this, you're actually seeing the white crosses around the edge. You just can't really identify them in the same way that you're seeing blues on the sides here, and you can't really identify them. So it is perfectly symmetrical. It may not look like it just on a swatch. You know, it definitely looks like there are white crosses and blue crosses, but there are not. So if you're swatching and trying to make a determination, just remember it's going to look the same either way. Now let's take a look at the chart. For all 3 sizes of this chart, additional border stitches were required, and we've talked about those in previous weeks and how those work. If you take a look at the 3 different sizes, you'll see that I've added them to both ends of the small and medium, but only one end of the large. So that is something you'll have to be mindful of depending on the size you're working. If you're going to use this pattern for another project, you don't need to incorporate those double boxed additional border stitches. Those are just to make sure from week to week our stitches fit on the same blanket or afghan. The stitches that are in the next set of boxes though, and the center stitches, both are essential. So the 3 stitches in the 14+3, those are the border stitches. Those do 2 different things. One is they make sure that at the end of the pattern your cross finishes off evenly. And the other thing they do is they make sure you always start with a knit stitch on your dominant color. And remember, we talked about that that's important. So you do have to always work those 3 stitches if you're taking this pattern into a new project. For our knit along, you'll be working right to left when you read the chart. You'll work the additional border stitches. Remember that large doesn't have any in the beginning. And then you're going to work the original border stitches. And each of those you only ever work once. Next, you're going to repeat the center stitches. Those make up the stitch pattern. And you'll keep going until you have either 5 or 4 or 3 stitches left, depending on what size you're working. And then when you get to the end, you're going to work the original border stitches that are there. Every size has 2. And your additional border stitches, which are 3, 2, and 1, depending on the size. And you only ever work those border stitches once at the end. Okay, if you have questions about this stitch pattern or you want to share your work, please come and join our Facebook group. We are happy to have you. Next week we'll be working on our final stitch. We're almost done. I can't believe that these 3 weeks have already flown by and it's almost 4 weeks. But yeah, you'll be able to get that last pattern and be finishing off the blankets. And then I would love to see your final projects. I'd love seeing the different yarns that folks have been choosing and how the stitches look a little bit different depending on whichever yarn it is. But if you have questions, in the information down below, you can find a link to that group that I mentioned. You can also find a link to the written pattern for this knit along. That includes this stitch and 3 others, or will include 3 others, only 2 at this time. It also has a chart for each stitch and each size, and you'll find the links to all the videos so far, as well as a link to the yarn and the needles that I'm using, and then my homepage at Yarns Length. If you did like what you saw here, I do ask that you like and subscribe. It really helps other knitters find our page and join our knit along. I'll see you guys next week.